Red FM.
Year 2019 is on its fag end, and we are just 2 weeks away from the next year, 2020. Joining me today is Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley, who will be talking about the past spring election as well as her future plans. So let's welcome her and start the conversation. Welcome, Rachel Notley.
Oh, it's good to be here. Good to be able to chat with you again. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And my first question is that from premier to opposition leader, how has been the transition?
Well, it's obviously it's been a change. There's no question, and obviously in some ways it's disappointing when you run to win and you don't win. There's no getting around that. But on the flip side, there are some unexpected positives around it. I mean, certainly one of the things is that I have more time now to be able to actually reach out and talk to Albertans and to hear from them directly about their experiences, what's working, what's not, and what they care about. When you're a premier, you spend a lot of time making decisions and running the province. And as opposition leader, where my job is to be the voice of Albertans to the government on things where maybe they aren't happy with what the government's doing, it means that I have the opportunity, as I say, to spend more time just connecting with Albertans. And so that part is good.
So what do you think were the main reasons of the loss in the elections?
Well, I think at the end of the day, what I know, and I think what we all understand, is that Albertans have been going through a very difficult time. The price of oil went as low as $27 a barrel in 2015. And the economy, particularly in Calgary, has struggled ever since. And, certainly under our leadership, we did everything we could to create jobs and to grow the economy. And we created over 100,000 jobs. We were, in fact, leading the country in economic growth in 2017 and 2018. But then it plateaued again, and people continued to be worried about those things. And so in the spring, people wanted anyone who could tell them that they had a plan to create jobs and grow the economy. And quite honestly, that's what Jason Kenney ran on, was jobs in the economy. Now, he hasn't delivered that. He's delivered the opposite of that. So things are very different now than where they were in the spring because Jason Kenney has absolutely not delivered what he promised. But I understand that folks for several years and even now were very and still are concerned about their economic security. And we were in government during that time. And we obviously didn't cause the drop in the price of oil, but it makes sense that people go look to their government to solve it. And because we had not solved all of it, I think we made progress, but we didn't solve it all. It's not surprising that people were going to hold us responsible. The new situation, though, is that we have a government that also needs to take responsibility. They ran on it, and they need to take responsibility. And they need to stop blaming absolutely everybody else for what is now their job.
So as Premier of Alberta, what do you think was your biggest achievement?
Well, as I said, we did work very hard to try and turn the economy around. We did have 2 years of growth. We were creating jobs. We were making real progress in terms of stimulating economic diversification in particular, which I think is so fundamentally important to Alberta's future. And so we made some progress there. I think the single biggest measure, though, I think, is that even while we were in the midst of perhaps the biggest recession of a generation or more, we were actually able to cut poverty by half. We pulled over 40,000 children out of poverty. And so in my view, that was an important achievement. And when you're able to reduce the gap between rich and poor, when you're able to reduce inequality by raising up those who struggle the most, then you're laying the groundwork for prosperity and growth going forward. And so I was pleased about that.
So as leader of opposition, how have been the first 8 months now?
Well, I mean, it's been a very volatile time. I mean, we basically, we've seen a government that has made cuts. They promised to protect frontline services. Instead, they're cutting them, cutting those services. They promised to create jobs. Instead, we've seen 26,000 jobs lost and the economy flatlining. They basically lied about what their priorities were in the election, and then we've seen an unprecedented level of corruption, and not just unprecedented in Alberta, but unprecedented in Canada, with the firing of the elections commissioners. So essentially, cuts, lies, corruption. That's mostly what's been driving the agenda for the last 8 months, and all of it to fund this $4.7 billion corporate handout, which is not created any jobs. It's just resulted in Albertans subsidizing the relocation of many large companies to other places, because we all know that what the oil and gas industry in Alberta actually needs is market access. That's what's going to bring investment, or that's what makes us lose investment. And meanwhile, we're spending $4.7 billion on a failed strategy and creating unnecessary austerity with respect to things that matter to regular families. Our education system, what the kind of experience our kids have in our schools and our universities. Those things are now at risk because of this handout.
And as you said that while sitting in the legislature, when you see that the policies and initiatives started by you are being erased, how do you feel then?
Well, obviously, in a lot of cases, it's frustrating because there were certainly some things that they ran on, and so fair enough, we need to accept that. Although you will note, I'm sure many of your listeners will have caught the news about how even their single biggest pitch, the so-called job-killing carbon tax, which they got rid of in July, we now see them putting documents in front of the courts which show that, in fact, the carbon tax was not slowing the economy in any measurable way. And so that was sort of one of the things that they did, which we now realize, the facts didn't support their position in the first case. So it's frustrating when we see those changes. But the other thing that I've found, though, is that, they've gone past it. So, for instance, with Bill 6, or our Bill 6, the protecting farm workers, Alberta was the only place in the country that didn't have protection for farm workers. They ran on reversing the changes we made. Fine. But then we discovered that they didn't just reverse the changes we made. They also went back about 90 years and eliminated any right for farm workers to be paid a minimum wage or any wage at all. And so that kind of sort of bait and switch tactic that we're seeing is very frustrating for us in the legislature.
And you were talking about the jobs and everything. We have seen and we have heard that there are thousands of jobs being laid off either in the frontline services or in many public sectors. But UCP has been denying on it. They are saying that there would be no layoffs in any other public sector. What do you want to say about that?
Well, as I think I've said before, I've never experienced the level of dishonesty that this government is prepared to operate with in my whole political career. The reason we talk about the thousands of people who are going to lose their jobs is because of letters that were written by senior public officials to unions that outline very clearly that as of April 1st, thousands of jobs are going to be lost, roughly 5,000 in the healthcare and even more in the general public service. And we see reports like, 2 days ago, 50 people that work for the Department of Agriculture just got let go. We're seeing people being let go all over the place. And for them to sit there and try to suggest that that's not happening is so disrespectful to the people of this province. If you believe that throwing people out of work in order to finance a $4.7 billion corporate handout is the right way to go, not surprisingly, I don't believe that. But if you do, which apparently they believe, then at least have the courage of your convictions to tell people what you're doing. But don't do these things and then lie to people about it, which is what they're doing, because it's all in black and white in documents. We didn't make it up. We were just reading documents they produced.
So from present scenario, where do you foresee Alberta going ahead?
Well, I think that we're going to have some tough times ahead. I think that the conversation this spring around the budget is going to be very challenging. I mean, we've already seen a lot of cuts. For instance, in the Calgary education system, we're seeing people having to pay significantly higher school fees, busing fees, just to get their kids into their classrooms,
Yeah.
new fees for tuition, and I think it's going to get much worse next year. The kinds of cuts that we see being forecast in the budget mean that we haven't even begun to see the worst of it for our schools, for instance. And so I think that the fights are going to be pretty hard because, our kids, if they spend 2 or 3 years not getting the education they need, they're going to spend their whole life trying to catch up on that. And so we have to fight really hard to protect the future of our children. So what we're going to do as an opposition going forward is not only will we be, oppositional, we're also working very hard to propose alternatives. So, 9 days ago, we rolled out our alternative budget, and people can go to albertandp.ca and or I think it's ndpcaucus.ca, and you can find our alternative budget there. And what we want people to know is it doesn't have to be this way. There is a different approach.
And talking on the individual, when we talk about you, are you interested in federal politics now?
Oh, no. I'm not at all interested in federal politics. And the reason is I love my province. I love Alberta. I've been, I was born here and I've lived in other parts of the world and in other parts of the country, but came back here because I've always known, what we can be. We are, courageous, we are innovative, we are optimistic when we're at our best. We make things happen. We lead the country. This is an exciting place to live, and I want it to be that way again. So that's where I want to be.
And what's the driving force behind you, which turns you so passionate about politics?
Well, I sort of grew up in a political household, but my dad was political. My mother was very active in. She was actually quite religious, but she was very active in social justice issues. And so between the two of them, what I learned is that the most important thing you can do is actually try to make life better for people who are struggling, and that's what you. That's the way to sort of live your best life, and I know that people are struggling in Alberta right now. I know what it can look like when we make better choices. I know the potential of this province, and I want to see us to reach it. And so that's what gets me up in the morning.
And what would you like to say in closing?
Well, I just want to say to all of your viewers and all your listeners, happy holidays. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas season and holiday season, and that they all enjoy connecting with family and neighbors. And Happy New Year to everybody as well.
Thank you very much. So this was NDP leader Rachel Notley, who was talking about her plans about future, and she also discussed the reasons about the loss in the election and all those factors. We'll be definitely bringing some other year-end interviews to you. Till then, goodbye.